What is this thing called love?
One of America's greatest writers. For years, his work has defined literary nonfiction, what Tom Wolfe once called the new journalism. And his words have inspired millions of readers and writers around the world. His best-selling books include 1981's Thy Neighbor's Wife, which is also on sale outside, which is being reissued this month by HarperCollins, and which last week a 26-year-old writer for Newsweek quite accurately described as a riveting exploration of America's sexual revolution. Gay has written a new afterword for this classic book, which has proved to be both brave, bold, and remarkably ahead of its time. During the research for my biography, Virginia Masters, who is still alive, age 84, living in St. Louis, with a certain fondness recalled Gay as naughty for once asking her and Bill Masters in front of a convention of American newspaper editors how often they made love. At the time, Masters and Johnson were married and were recognized as America's reigning experts on sex. Famous for the biggest sex experiment in US history that included more than 10,000 orgasms, Virginia smiled demurely at Talese, and in front of this jaded audience, she replied, "Who keeps count?" I'd like to just get this rolling, if I may, by also underlining, I mentioned the name Virginia Johnson. And in many ways, to me, Virginia Johnson is is in a sense a forgotten pioneer of female sexuality. The idea of equality in the bedroom. The idea that she was the woman who really made Masters and Johnson possible at a time when Bill Masters realized he wasn't going anywhere. And his dream of essentially documenting the human response and sexuality would not go anywhere unless he found the right partner. And after about more than a year, he did find Virginia Johnson. Bill, in many ways, was a classic medical genius. He was very much driven by seeking the goals that he did. His colleagues included those who had won Nobel Prizes and such. If you had to underline what does Masters and Johnson mean historically, it really is the medicalization of sex. Prior to Masters and Johnson, whether it be in the realm of sociology with Kinsey, or whether it be in the realm of religion for literally hundreds of years, or in the realm of Freudian psychology, sex was relegated to these areas. It was Masters and Johnson who really brought medicine into the fray of sexuality. Virginia Johnson was, by being able to recruit the volunteers that she did, she was able to essentially help them first document how the body responded sexually. And that was their first great work. Their aim in doing so was to understand how the body worked so that they could deal with a lot of the common, remarkably common problems that married couples in particular would have, where they would go to doctors, and often the doctors were ill-equipped to give them the type of information to solve their sexual problems. So it was that second book that relied upon the documentation that provided the therapy, and that revolutionized sexual therapy today. I just want one last point here. I want to underline that Virginia Johnson was, in many ways, her story is kind of like the Pygmalion story. She was a divorced woman coming back to college, looking for a degree with two children in tow. She was literally filling out insurance forms when she was recruited by Bill Masters to become essentially an associate of his, but eventually a full partner. And it was her remarkable ability, her native genius, that pioneered the therapy that they created. It's 50 years ago, fundamentally, when their partnership emerged. And one of the things that's really striking to me, and I'd like to see if we could touch upon that at some point, is that the level of sexual dysfunction, really the reason, the raison d'etre for Masters and Johnson's work, still is relatively the same, at the same level as it was 50 years ago when Masters and Johnson began. That to me is a rather remarkable statement, and it's been in a number of different recent studies, particularly given the fact of the Viagra, the emergence of Viagra and other type of wonder drugs, the level of just the discourse and information about sexuality that's been out there, and also about the changing cultural mores that have occurred with the much vaunted sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. So despite all of those changes, the fact that sexual dysfunction seems to still be a problem, nearly at the same extent, is to me very interesting, and I've even had conversations about that with Virginia Johnson relatively recently. Ultimately, though, my book deals with that old song that Sinatra used to sing. It's a Cole Porter lyric that says, "What is this thing called love?" Clinically, Masters and Johnson attempted to answer that question. And yet, their personal story, at the beginning of the book, both of them, you're introduced to their early loves. And at the end of the book, they go back looking for their lost loves. The whole idea of yearning for love and what love is all about was often what motivated married couples to seek help in the first place. And I think that's a leitmotif that I think adds a degree of eternalness to the narrative. So with that, Laurie, I'd like to once again pass the baton, and perhaps Mr. Talese may have a few thoughts to kick in.
Let her have the baton.